Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Maharaj, to all the sages and saints of this world, and to you divine souls watching today's satsang. Today we are studying Sutra number 44 from the Samadhi Pad of the Raja Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, an extremely profound scripture from the Vedanta, Sanatana Dharma. This is the commentaries by Swami Jyotirmayananda and narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get into the sutra. It is Etayeva Savichara Nirvichara Cha Sukshma Vishaya Vyakhyata. Let me repeat. Etayeva Savichara Nirvichara Cha Sukshma Vishaya Vyakhyata. That means etayeva, by this, savichara, samadhi with reflection, nirvichara, samadhi without reflection, cha, and other lower samadhis. Sukshma Vishaya means pertaining to subtle objects. Sukshma means subtle. Vyakhyata have been explained. So sage Patanjali says, by the description of Savitark and Nirvitark Samadhi, as we just have covered in the previous sutras, the other samadhis have been explained in the same manner. So he says, take guidance from the stages of Nirvitark and Savitark and imagine all the other samadhis proceed the same way. The same process applies, in other words. As sattva increases in the mind of a yogi, he goes beyond the gross plane. Sattva, purity. The object that is adopted for the practice of meditation now becomes a channel to the subtler planes of existence. So from the rose or from Krishna, you are now into a totally different dimension where the energies are guiding you, and you are in sattva, so you are being propelled to move forward in that direction. And because you are pure, the other thoughts are not deviating you from your goal. So he discovers that every object is constituted of 5 subtle elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, and encounters mystic experiences pertaining to these subtle elements. You start becoming friends with the secrets of the universe. Most people don't get to that stage because they don't go through this process. They have never experienced the nectar, so they don't know. They just find joys in the little things of the world, but inside is a much bigger and a much more wholesome treasure that is bigger than anything the world can give us. But you have to go through this process to start enjoying this mystic experience. So he may have supersensory perceptions, or see mystic lights, or hear mystic sounds, or find his mind filled with increasing joy and sublimity. So this is where you start getting better and better in your samadhi experience, and the divine energy blesses you more and more because you are decoding, as I said, the mysteries, and therefore you experience sublimity, you experience joy, you see supersensory perceptions, you may hear sounds from far away, you may see things in your vision during sattva and samadhi state. So these subtle elements have their mystic colors and characteristics. All of these 5, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Going backwards, Akash is called ether. Ether is Akash, or the sky, which is blue. It's not the sky itself. Ether, by definition, is the subtlest of the element, and it is of blue color, and that relates to those of you who do Kundalini or who are aware of that. It's related to the Vishuddhi chakra, or the throat center. It is the source of sound. From here the sound comes. Vayu is the air element, which is green in color and is related to your heart center, or the Anahata chakra. So perception of touch proceeds from this element. air. And then comes the fire element, which is Agni. It has the red color and it relates to the Manipur chakra inside your navel, and its function is through sight, seeing. Water element or Jal is related to the Swadhisthana chakra, and it is at the root of the regenerative reproductive organs, and from this element arises taste, Swadhisthana chakra. And earth element or Prithvi, which is the lowest chakra, has a yellow color, and it relates to Mooladhara chakra, or the base of your spine, and smell is its characteristic. So your smell comes from Mooladhara, and then the taste comes from Swadhisthana, and then the sight comes from Manipura, and then touch comes from Anahata, and then Vishuddhi gives you the sound element. So all these elements have different characteristics and the way they work. And having passed through Savitarka and Nivitarka, a yogi enters into the subtle plane. Now you have crossed Savitarka and Nirvitarka, you have moved on to the next plane, and this is called Savichara Nirvichara Samadhi. So basically you have vichar, means there is no longer the agitation of the thoughts, but he enters into a subtler plane. So the gross was the Savitarka, Nirvitarka, you were seeing gross objects and gross thoughts, but now at this level a yogi is unable to separate the subtle elements from his mental associations of time, space and other concepts. So you have entered into the subtle, but you are still into the learning phase of how to separate time and space. At this stage the samadhi is called savichara. You are in the subtle aspect, but you still have vichar, means thoughts. So that the thoughts are arising. But when he rises beyond his association and his mind shines itself, then the subtle elements caused by the faculty of memory and imagination, he attains nirvichara samadhi. So by constant practice of savichara samadhi, he rises above and goes into where even the thoughts go away, and this is into the subtle aspect of things, no longer gross, but even at the subtle level the thoughts and imagination goes away and it becomes more one-pointed. So these are all graduation steps in the field of samadhi. So when nirvichara samadhi becomes intensified, so even when the thoughts have totally stopped and they become intensified, which means they start taking hold for a while, and with more focus a yogi ascends the ladder to subtler planes of existence. So even it goes from subtle to more subtle and to more minute. He reaches the level of ahankara tattva. Ahankara tattva is your ego principle, and from there from the mind and senses have proceeded. So your mind and senses have actually come from that ahankara tattva. So now through your dissection and thinning out of your mind and senses and ego, the way you are now being able to reach to the source of these things. So the mind and senses are far away. You have now gone deeper into the source that has created the mind and senses. So then a samadhi becomes super joyous, and therefore it's called sananda samadhi, or samadhi with joy. It's full of ecstasy and joy. So a word of caution here, a lot of people reach that state and they have so much bliss that they don't want to come out of it, and sage Patanjali wants to guide us that that is still not the end destination yet. We still have a long way to go. So don't think, and a lot of people actually do get confused, that's the state they think they have self-realized themselves. They think they have attained nirvana or mukti, because why are they experiencing so much bliss then all the time? Whenever they do samadhi, it's coming more and more, but that's So just imagine what is self-realization, whereas this halfway stop itself is giving you so much joy. So this is, but those who get into this level and don't want to proceed further, or are not guided properly, then they still have to take another birth, and then they continue the process. So termination of life and death does not occur at this stage. That's another important point for people to know. But even then, this is still considered a good advanced state of samadhi that not everybody achieves. Remember, these are still lower samadhis, but the third step is the higher stage of the lower samadhi. But with increasing purity of the chitta, which means your mind stuff, mind, senses, intellect and ego, when unconscious, when these are combined, it's called the chitta. The yogi goes beyond the ego center when you do that, and he discovers the causal plane. So from physical to astral to causal, now you're in the causal plane, which is even more attenuated, even more thinned out, even more subtle. So then the samadhi is called Sasmita Samadhi, and Sasmita is where your ego comes out of. That is the source of the ego. Remember, the ego has not yet come. So this is like a seed state. Imagine watching a seed and then watching a banyan tree. So that's what really happens. The seed state of the ego is very blissful, very pure, very calm, but when it grows, it and connects with the world, it attains a gigantic proportion that sometimes is not so good. But at this state where the person has reached, it is full of happiness, as we just saw. So the next sutra will explain the range of the subtle planes of existence, and that we will be covering tomorrow. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.